we need to start thinking that starting from the house, we can generate impact, which means economical, environmental, and social impact on the long term.
So hello and welcome to another episode on Design to Connect. As you might know by now, Season 2 is all about connecting with anyone who is using design to make a positive impact, reduce inequalities, and contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Our today's guest is someone really special. I have been her intern for about 6 months, and I can say that she is the best boss, mentor, and teacher. She works on a lot of interesting things, and she's kind and overall a beautiful soul and brain to work with. I cannot box her in one title, but to summarize and as her LinkedIn profile reads, she's an expert in design for social innovation, founder of HousingLab, and director of Impact Housing Foundation. There are a lot of things that I can't even say. So, and her name is Liat Rogel. Hi, Liat. So happy to have you here. How are you?
Hi, Rezu. I'm very happy to be here as well.
Great. I think the first time that I told you about this, it was almost a year ago. So I'm happy that we are finally doing this. And but before going to the conversation and starting the conversation, I'm just gonna tell our listeners a little bit about you and what you do, and then I'm gonna start with a lot of questions. So you are a service designer and expert in social innovation. You are passionate about creative processes and developing new tools for design thinking and innovative strategies towards sustainability. As a founder of HousingLab, a laboratory for urban innovation in housing, you facilitate and coach processes of urban housing renewal. As the director of Impact Housing Foundation, you've been exploring how private investments may be used to generate more social housing options. You also coordinate and manage local and European projects aiming at improving urban lifestyle from an environmental and social point of view. You've been the lead expert of the Roof Urbex Network aiming to end homelessness. You're the project manager of the pilot action of the H2020 project Centrino. In the past, you've worked also with the municipality of Milan. You're also a teacher in IES abroad, Milan, and hold a PhD in design from Politecnico di Milano, as well as master degrees in service design and a bachelor degree in industrial design. Wow.
All true.
This is not all. It's a summary. Anytime I come to your LinkedIn profile, I just get inspired. It's my inspirational page. So Liat, you are working on a lot of beautiful things in your professional life, and how I see it is that you're someone who have pivoted a lot and you're always in this learning mode, both in your professional and also during your education. So can you maybe start a little bit by telling us about your journey and the reasoning behind the decisions you've made that have led you here and to be the person you are now?
Sure. Thank you. And also for this super introduction. Always a little bit embarrassing, but thank you so much. And you have the roof cup there, so. Yes, my journey. Yeah, I like to speak about this journey because this podcast is also about how design relates to social inequalities or social inclusion. And for me, my journey starts with design and starts with kind of wish to end up on fancy magazines with furniture and products. And I was pretty convinced that this is what I really wanted to do until somewhere in the second year. And second year of the first degree, and I thought, I'm doing some useless things, and I'm not sure that this is what I want to do. And I even asked the professor at that time, like, how do you sit and draw a plastic object when outside you have war? And yeah, I was quite upset of that. But I also like to say that I'm very happy that at that moment I didn't decide to leave the design studies, because some time afterwards I understood that those skills that one can say, problem solving or creative thinking, design thinking, however you want to call it, these are really useful. It's just about, putting them in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I was lucky enough because for the master's degree, I ended up learning service design, and the service design course was promoted by Ezio Manzini, which is like my spiritual guru. So, and you could see people sometimes after they speak to me and say, "But Ezio Manzini," say, "Yes, I'm his sort of daughter." It's I come from this line of designers. So yeah, so the journey, the initial journey, and this is maybe nice for the young listeners who are studying. The beginning of the journey was that, and through service design, I managed quite quickly actually to get into more social projects, urban renewal, urban regeneration, and then well, in different ways of life and so on, focused on housing. And when I founded HousingLab, it was really to bring to Italy and to Milan the idea of collaborative housing. And yeah, and again, sometimes I have those moments that I said, yeah, wait, but I'm a designer and I'm doing things that are not necessarily, thought of as design, but I do believe that they are. And I do believe that these abilities actually make my work sometimes more interesting for the public, for the nonprofit, because you bring up a new way of thinking, a new way of doing things. So this is, yeah, a little about journey. I don't know if there is anything specific more that you would like to know about that.
Maybe just one question. If you wanted to say that, if you wanted to tell about one attribute or one character that is inside you that led you to be where you are today, what would that be?
This is a bit tricky, but I think it would be the mediator. So I often take the pieces, put them together, manage to put people around the table from different fields, from different cultures, create those connections. So I think that and with mediation comes also managing to see something complex and say it or visualize it or verbalize it in simpler terms. I think maybe some people usually say to me that I'm able of doing that, of making something complex clear. So I think it's a mediator tool, no, because you need to speak with some people. So I think it's that, and I cannot really say where did I take this skill. I cannot point out something specific in my education. So I guess it was somehow in me and somehow evolved with my work.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I was always thinking why you're so good at managing. So that's the mediation between different things. So a lot of the projects that you worked on is in one way or another, they're related to housing. Yeah. But they see housing from very different aspects. Like there's not two projects that you work on that looks at the same aspect when it comes to housing. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I feel the aspects of housing that you work on, it's very much different. It's very much more advanced, let's say, than what the, let's say, mainstream industry of design or architecture is focusing on. So if you can tell us a little bit about the projects that you're working on, and what are some elements in housing that you're trying to address?
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe it's not coming from architecture, so I'm not an architect, that when I decided to focus on housing, coming more from the service design approach, it was very much human-centered. And the starting point was never the building itself, the construction, or the shape of the house, but more the function. What do you do with the house? And in particular way, my interest in cities. So the fact that we are all dense in smaller spaces, so we live next to each other, this density. And this density is negative very often. So people feel, like they are stressed or put together, or the house in terms of architecture needs to fit more people in a smaller space. But on the other hand, it opens a lot of opportunity to collaborate and to know one another, because with the neighbors, some things are just easier, even if they're not friends. It's easier, to share an activity, or to share a tool, or to ask for something when you need a little sugar because it's over. You don't call your friend on the other side of the city. You call a neighbor if you can. So this was my starting point. Like, how the house can become actually a welfare point through the relationship between people. So how connecting people can actually make sure that they live better in a city. And next to the concepts of co-housing or collaborative housing, because these existing, since, I don't know, 1920 to 1930, we already see some examples. So they are not new, but they always explored this relationship between the balance that we have in our family and job balance, in the loneliness and social life. And this was my entry point to housing. And collaborative housing was my topic for many years. So with HousingLab, for example, we held the fair of collaborative housing, which we copied with the agreement of ID22, a wonderful organization working in Berlin that holds this fair for many years. I had the chance to work with ID22. And then when I came back to Italy, I brought this fair, and we created 3 editions of this fair, maybe for the first time, really uniting all the stakeholders around collaborative housing. So it was very, very interesting. And we mapped the existing experiences of collaborative housing. Eventually, we wrote a book about it. So this was, let's say, the main focus in the early years of HousingLab.
And then with the other projects,
yes, and then I was then I was let's say pretty lucky to work in Urbact, dealing more with homelessness. And the homelessness side that I didn't know about, and I was definitely not an expert on the topic of homelessness, I was very happy to explore it, because I was the lead expert of 9 cities in an Urbact program that exchanged not solely about homelessness, but how to end homelessness through housing first. So the relationship with housing was there. And I learned how, you are right, that I'm pretty much all the time in a learning mode. I learned that, first of all, homelessness is conceived in very different ways, and we cannot compare it because we're counting it in different ways. In some countries, you'd count only people sleeping in the street. In some countries, you would have larger categories of homeless. And then I learned about Housing First. So Housing First is a method where instead of a stairway approach, where a person to get out of the streets needs to take several steps, like curing mental health issues, working on your dependency, getting you to the job market, and then in the very end, you will find the house. It is as if the house was a prize. Housing First brings the house as a first step. So says, let's find the stability and the security of a house as a first step. And then, of course, we don't just leave you in the house, but we offer a whole range of services, social services, health services that will help you to, live again in decent accommodation. And it is also not a new approach. And there is a lot of scientific evidence about the fact that Housing First works. We know it works when people stay in the house. This is the main measure of Housing First. So other homeless people would go in and out of the system. Okay, so maybe they will reach that final step of a house, and then after some months or a year or so, they will be back in the street because they don't have what it takes to actually regain a living. And with Housing First, people stay in the house. There is a small percentage of people that are not suitable for this approach, but all in all, the approach is very successful. So what we did in the 9 cities arrived with, and I worked with municipalities, no? So it's not only with cities, it's really with the municipality and what they do. So each municipality arrived with a different level. Some had no idea of what Housing First was, and some were quite advanced. And the exchange between them brought each municipality to advance on their own steps. Okay, so if you had nothing, you've reached maybe awareness, training for people that are working there, small experimentations. And if you were advanced, you were working more on guaranteeing the quality, making sure that you are up to date, maybe connecting better to a national strategy. So this was for me also very interesting to work with completely different contexts, but focusing on Housing First. And if you want let's say the last bit with the Impact Housing Foundation, looks at how private investments, not only, but also private investment, can take care of people that are otherwise excluded from the housing market. So these can be homeless again, or it can be people that are at risk of homelessness, in great poverty. And we are used to think that the public takes care of these people alone. So this is in the hands of the public. And if it's private, well, it's free market. And with the foundation, we are trying to demonstrate and to test and to explore how these mixed forms can work and how you can really generate different kinds of impact with a starting point of housing. So this is, let's say, the last point. We are working on a European project exploring discrimination in the housing market. So how people with migratory backgrounds do not find accommodation, even in cities where accommodation is available. Now, so we are working on that. What are the tools to solve that? How is it working in different countries? So through the Impact Housing Foundation, we have also this nice look at different topics because of the funding members of the foundation and what they bring.
Yeah, this last one is really interesting for me because I've seen, like, being from a migrant.
You have experience.
It's not very easy to find house or trust people to trust you in general.
That's true.
But I wanted to ask you, like, you're working in these different housing projects. You think most of the issues that exist within, let's say, the housing sector, you think, are they more cultural? Are they more design related? Are they more policy related? Of course, it's the mixture of all of them, but what could be a starting point? Or if we want to take an integrated approach, how to deal with these different levels?
Yes, right now I would use the terms that we're using in the Impact Housing Foundation to say that we need to start thinking that starting from the house, we can generate impact, which means economical, environmental, and social impact on a long term. So first of all, to stop thinking that the house, is four walls around you. It's much more than that. So you can expect more when you build housing complexes. And this would be a small starting point. And on certain levels, like the environmental part, it has become quite clear, no? That if you have houses that are more energy efficient or less energy efficient, then, the environment will suffer more or less from that. And we have certifications and we have innovation on how to move forward and so on. On affordability, we're a little bit behind, meaning we're still using sort of old methods when we think about affordable housing. So how do we get enough money to build the cheapest houses for the people in need? And then we create poverty ghettos. And then we don't think maybe about the environmental part. It's very absurd. But when you think only in one sector, then leaving out the other ones behind, you find yourself again in the beginning of the loop, no? And the social aspects, of course. So even with the most beautiful building, energy efficient, even affordable, okay, when you don't think about the social aspects, about the community development, then again, you're missing a point there. Integration, okay? So I think that first of all, we need always to consider the house or housing with these three sustainability pillars. That would be really important. And then the contexts vary a lot. So we have the issue of the big cities, like Milan, for example. You cannot really compare it to another city in Italy. You need to be speaking about Berlin, Paris, Amsterdam, because what we see here is a city with population growth, developing very quickly, very successful somehow, no? But always with these two cities in one. So one part of the city is advancing, is going, and another one is left behind. And how many people are you leaving behind? Who are the people that you're leaving behind? And this is the same issue. So we can speak about gentrification if you wish. We can speak about, the value of the houses, people that actually are essential for the city as workers that need to live far away. And so these are, let's say, the big cities issues with housing. Then we have the cities that are shrinking or are getting older. And there you really need to understand in terms of housing, how do you attract people? How do you keep people in the house? Or maybe even how the house can generate job opportunities? Because, you can also there, you cannot really separate the topics. I mean, cities are usually shrinking because people don't have anything to do there. And then we can speak about rural areas, villages. And for example, in Italy, this is a big deal because we are seeing rural areas and villages getting empty. And then we have people that don't find accommodation in cities. So we have a homelessness issue, no? And this is always also a question of how do you match the demand and offer? Of course, not just throwing people away somewhere, just to giving them a roof. So again, thinking about all the possibilities. So, but I think that if I have to say a starting point, I would say never forget one of the three pillars. Always look at all the three of them, and then know your context, because your context will change completely the way that you deal with housing. Like we have beautiful examples of social housing in Milan, but you cannot just take them, copy them, and paste them in another context, because it will not have the same effect. So we also need to adapt. Yes, we need to look at best practices. That's always useful. But then we need to think, okay, where am I? And how do I take this into my specific context?
Yeah, and I mean, just listening to you for the last couple of minutes, I realized how complex is to build a house or to design, any project related to housing, and how much we are reducing it into just copying the same designs and just focusing on how it looks from outside. And we are completely losing the real picture.
It is as if with housing, we forget the word innovation. No, we have technological innovation for mobility or for the food sector or for, all sort of technologies that we have around connectivity. And then it comes to housing, and we do have some excellent examples and excellent architects that are thinking, how can my house be, zero consumption, self-sustained, recycling water, using solar panels. This has come, but we do not innovate, for example, this type of apartments. And demographically, we have changed completely. So Milan has a majority of single person households. And what do we expect that single households do? Live in a very small room, without the place to host people or to enjoy the company, but on the other hand, they cannot afford a larger one. Can't we really think of some innovative shapes? Or can we think that the house can be flexible? And I have seen examples of this around Europe, where from a structural point of view, you can decide to put the walls and the water everywhere you want, so that even in time, your house can adapt to the needs of the household. And this, I think, is missing. So we are still building the interiors for a model of a family that actually does not exist or is not the majority. You can speak the other way around. You know very well, I have 3 children. It's very difficult in a city like Milan to find an apartment for the bigger families. Mm-hmm. So when we speak also about migratory backgrounds, and very often we have bigger families with migratory backgrounds, they are really having a hard time finding their way in Milan. True. Yeah, so innovation is very tough on that specific bit of housing.
Yeah, and I think a reason for that can be, especially the ones who are designing the housings, let's say the architecture studios. For years, architecture have been such an isolated field. Like architects almost never talk to any other profession. And now, new ways are coming, and people are starting to have collaborations, and multi-stakeholder collaborations are being built. But it's for years the same repetitive, let's say, routines have been repeated. But
absolutely.
Yes. Moving forward. But I wanted to a little bit focus more on the roof network and the project, because homelessness is it's a topic that is really close to my heart. So you explained a little bit about the emergency and a staircase and housing first approach, and still in very big developed modern cities, also looking at Milan, housing first is not anywhere close to be high in the agenda. So
that's true.
Why? I mean, not that you should have the answer, but how can we take a step towards that? And why do you think that is the reason?
Yeah, maybe I'll start from the last one. to really adopt a housing first approach, you need to arrive to a systemic change. It's not a project. It's not, part of your homelessness strategy is housing first. This needs to be your strategy because everything changes with housing first. Okay. And slowly you are going into eliminating, deleting the shelter approach. Okay. And so, first of all, systemic change is always more difficult than other changes. Okay, it requires a lot. And second thing is that, there is a sort of mindset that people know for many years, okay, that unless you start and bringing in and looking at the evidence and also testing, so housing first cannot stay as a project, but you can test it small before you start. So until you do that, there are people that, their life is around working in shelters. Maybe the city has invested right now, a lot of money in renovating the shelters. And it's very difficult to see how you can live without shelters. And that was a nice story when we started off the Roof network and we had our kickoff meeting, and it was in Naples. And we visited a big shelter that was actually being renovated at that time. And we had people from Glasgow in Scotland, and they looked around, and then one of them came to me and said, we haven't had this since so many years. And this was difficult even for me to understand, because it was like, how do you do that? Where do you offer, a quick solution, a bed for people? And because they had the change, they don't remember, to have had shelters. So it's a big, big change. This is why you don't see it spread out. And the second reason, it requires housing. So then in some countries, shelter has become housing, but it's not enough. In some places, you have a better public housing system where you can start and integrate, in others less. In some cities, countries where we're working, we don't even have a public housing system. It's inexistent. Worked with Romania, Timișoara in Romania. They were saying, if we start to give the homeless people a house, we have a lot of people living in poverty that will actually be against this because they live in poor conditions. And how come we give a house to the homeless, Homeless also have a stigma of being lazy or not wanting to recover from their life. No, so it is not easier to implement that. How to make this happen? I mean, you hear about it. There are several organizations in Milan that are adopting housing first strategies, but they are always in this testing or project phase. They have a really hard time scaling up, okay? And this is also due to the fact, this lack of housing options, let's say, that we have a huge market that is owned by people. So Italy has a sort of 70-30% percentage. So you don't have a lot of influence. You don't manage to get a lot of offer from the market. And I think probably non-readiness or even lack of knowledge of the fact that this is a systemic change, which is not coming from a national point of view, because honestly, those cities that I saw that were more advanced gained from a national strategy. So when your nation starts saying, we want to end homelessness and we do it with housing first, it makes it easier for cities to adopt those strategies. You get more funding, you get more agreement or public agreement, political consents. So it would be really helpful if on a national level we'd had a policy like that.
So that's the place to start.
Mhm.
But I think something that when we talk about housing first, the first thing that comes to people's mind is that it is very expensive.
Sure.
Um, so, and we know that there is data that says that in long term, housing first has
Yeah.
benefit both for the beneficiaries and also for the city itself. So, can you explain that a little bit? Um,
Yes, it's true. I mean, when you speak about offering housing, or if you compare housing to shelters, then housing are more expensive. And it's not only housing, it's also the support that you're offering to people in the house. And if you think about it, in a shelter, you have centralized support. And when people live in all parts of the city, then the support is not centralized no longer. So it also costs more. Um, One should see it as an investment. So, if what we see in the studies is true, and people manage then to stay out of social services, okay, then eventually, as a state, we also save, because these people will enter to a normality of a job, of family, of life, and will not need this support. On the other hand, we have seen people living in shelters for years and years, constantly getting this support. And around the support of just, a bed and a meal, you also have healthcare services, jails. So a day in prison costs a lot for the state. And when you calculate that again on a long term, then the investment is an investment. It's a good return. But this is once again very often difficult to show, because what you need immediately is quite a big investment.
True.
I believe in some places that would be easier than in others. So those cities that do have availability of housing, then also the investment is lower, because you don't think of building new, you're thinking of acquiring or renting a space. Yeah, it's also easier in countries where the welfare subsidies are higher. No, so if you think that you live in a place when you are unemployed or sick, and you get enough also to pay a small rent, comparing it to a place when you are unemployed or sick, you don't get anything, it changes as well. So yeah, this is it is complex. It's not that it's easy to do, but if you believe in it and you think, okay, on a long term, this will actually end homelessness. So you move from, managing a problem to actually ending it. If this is your priority, then you take the steps towards it.
Yeah. And the issue with Milan is that, like, I've been doing for a year some street works, and is that even the people who are working are not able to have housing, and a lot of homeless people that we see in the street are people who go to work in the morning and come back to sleep in the street. And
yes.
Also, what they say is that most of them prefer to sleep in the street rather than go to the shelters, because the situation of shelters are very not good. So
absolutely, absolutely, the working poor is a big issue all over Europe, also in Milan. So we cannot imagine, people that are not doing anything from morning to night. It's really people that are working but are unable to pay the rent. And so we're back to the point where we speak about what happens when the city grows, who is left behind, how affordable or not are the options. Yeah. And again, how we could benefit from collective solutions which are not a shelter. So maybe you could think about some solutions that would make you have a roof on top of your head, still have community spaces, community assistance, okay? But long term, but with your independency. And we're not thinking in these directions.
Yeah. Again, it goes back to innovation, as you were
Exactly.
saying.
Yeah.
And if now we want to go back a little bit to the roof network, you said before also that you were in 9 European cities working together. And you think what were some of the things that you learned from a network of this size that you think if you would only be working within the city that you're living in, you would not learn otherwise? Like, what were some of the learnings of the network?
Yeah, working with a network is really interesting because also the interactions between the municipalities, between the cities was very interesting. Sometimes it was just sharing ideas or sharing good practices for one city. And then another city would say, this is really interesting for me, and I think I can implement that. And they even called someone from that city as an expert to explain a little bit what is happening. And this was, of course, the sharing and learning together is really nice and very, very helpful. And I think that this, what I said before about the starting points, having an overview of the different options. So again, you work with Timișoara in Romania, and you don't have public housing. People are poor. They have no idea what Housing First is. But then slowly you discover they had a very innovative method to make sure that children are not on the street anymore. Mm-hmm. And they are a city that, also grows and has population growth because people are coming there to work and so on. And in those 2 years that we worked together, the end of the process, the social workers and the people in the municipality knew about Housing First. They knew what it meant. They translated documents. They brought in experts. And they actually, the spark of something different that can happen arrived there. And when you see that, and on the other hand, you see Ghent in Belgium, and they arrive and they already have Housing First in place, but they say, we do not manage to scale. We have, 100 people living in apartments. So I'm not speaking about 3-4, I'm speaking 100. But to scale from that becomes very difficult because our social workers are in overload and they don't know how to manage that. And then the quality goes down. And through this project, through exchanging with a more advanced city, with people that tried out also in non-advanced city different ways of working, supporting people, they managed to test a new team working with the homeless people with a new method. So I think that the network approach is useful because each city finds its own way of working while inspiring or getting inspired from the other ones. And and for me, I was very lucky. I think that all of the cities involved really got involved because they cared a lot about that, each with their own issues. And yes, and everyone did really nice steps. Maybe the last thing of the advantage of a network is that one of the final outputs of the roof network were recommendations to Europe. Mm-hmm. So we said it takes a city, a nation, and Europe. So each part, each authority has its role. The city can do as much as the city can do. Then you need the nation, the country, but also Europe can do some things. Because, for example, when Europe would decide on guidelines for how to count the homeless, you don't have one. Mm-hmm. There is no one European way of counting the homeless. And if Europe would do that, this would already allow us to speak in the same language. And if Europe would encourage Housing First as a method to end homelessness, then again, financing will arrive on that. Nations would want to be there on the front row too. So as a network, we had the possibility to say, hey, it's not just me or you and so on. We are 9 cities. We have worked together for more than 2 years, and this is what we recommend. So I don't know how far our recommendations would go, but the advantage was to have very concrete examples, very concrete actions in each of the cities. It was not just, the theory, which is, of course, very important, but we had the chance to give like concrete examples.
Good. And do you know of any of the cities that they're continuing on their work after?
All of them. All of them are working. I managed to get some updates from the cities right now. It can go in different directions. One more related to how you find housing, for example, on the private market, like is happening in France. Another one is more related to immigration, like we see in Greece, in Thessaloniki. So maybe taking different paths, but still all of them are working on that, and all of them are developing. In Braga, in Portugal, I've seen that they are carrying on the meetings with the local group that was created, because in Orbact, not only work on a transnational level, you have to build a local group that is working on a topic. And I see that this local group is carrying on the work. So this means that it's not only the municipality, but a group of involved stakeholders that are helping to actually maintain and implement those new strategies. So also they're very interesting. Of course, it would be interesting in a year or so to really get the feedback from the cities and understand the impact that this network had on each of them.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, that's very helpful. And then it would be interesting to see how it can become more systematic and hopefully
exactly.
Be repeated in other cities. And like working, let's say, having focused on the homelessness issues for almost 3 years, I think. How would you see the future of this issue, especially like in cities like in Milan, if we don't take any step towards it? How can we change it? It's a big question. Sorry.
No, and it's very tough. It's very tough because, also what we are seeing in other cities or bigger cities in the United States, for example, it's quite extreme. So where you really see rising numbers of homeless people. And again, as if you count that homeless people are not only the people in the street. I mean, a person that lives in a shelter is homeless. A person that lives in non-adequate housing is homeless person. We're just not counting them sometimes, but the amount can be quite high. If you live on a couch at friends or relatives, you are homeless. We really need to begin and acknowledge this issue, and as quick as possible work on the housing offer that we have, and making sure also that we are not leaving behind the potential homeless people, because this is something very urgent in a city like Milan, that some people are okay and they live, but they live on minimum wages. And then if only one person in the family, in the couple, loses the work, then they may just end up homeless. And so you need also to guarantee that they can stay in a house. You need to work on how to guarantee this relationship between homeowners and renters for both, because we can also not expect that to keep people in the house while not paying the rent, because then maybe the homeowner is losing a salary. So you have all these relationships there, and of course, I mean, there is no magic solution, because otherwise we would have implemented it. Definitely, I would hope that all this small work that is done in different cities in Italy can influence a more national approach to that, because I don't think that this is a matter of city. In some cities, you see more homeless people also because it's the place where they can get services. So if you imagine Milan, that has services for the homeless, would get the homeless people coming from all the surroundings of Milan. So they're even not representative of necessarily the citizens here. Yeah. But not because of that you want to end the services, but maybe you need to think in a metropolitan level and not only in your city. Yeah. So it's really a change in the approach, but we are living in a very risky moment between the economical crisis and the development of a city like Milan. I mean, I don't know if people can afford housing for so long.
It's scary. It's really
Yeah,
scary.
yeah. We need to be scared about this, but not to freeze, but to see the places where it has been working, to learn from those places. We can look at Sweden, but we can also look at Canada. We can look at some places in the United States did manage to implement that. So we really need to understand the real impact that happened in those places where these methods were successful, and try to work towards that.
So I want to ask you also a little bit more about impact housing, because you explained about that, but maybe we can just a little bit go more in detail. You talk about impact financing as it comes to promoting the urban and like human situation. Can you a little bit explain about that and how it relates to the work that you're doing with impact housing?
Sure. Yeah, so while impact financing is not so new, so we know for sure now that there are some investors that are not interested only in the economical return, but also in a social return.
Okay.
Usually those investors are the same ones that would donate, or would give something back. And in this case, with impact investments, they would invest. So they know that they can get their money back, but that they also get a benefit for someone else. And this allows them also to reinvest the money, creating a bigger impact. This is really the 2 cents of impact financing from a person which is not an expert on impact financing. The connection between impact financing and housing is also not so new, but it's new where we are less frequently we hear about that. And here we say, yes, you can invest in a house. People invest in houses all the time, right? I mean, it's one of the major investments that people or investors do. Why do they invest in a house? Because it's in a place where they know the value will grow, right? And they can get benefit from it. Could they also have a social benefit? So could you invest in a house thinking that you will get an economical return, but in the meantime, you'll do good? So someone could have a house, like a homeless person or a person which is waiting for a public house. A person in need will get this house. So we think it's possible. And we have seen it. The one founder that of the Impact Housing Foundation is Homes for All. And Homes for All is a company that is doing exactly that. They are purchasing apartments or buildings right now in Turin and slowly spreading, but right now in Turin. And they fix the housing, they renovate them. So actually also contributing to making their value bigger. And then they offer the housing to the municipality of Turin. And the municipality of Turin puts people which are on the waiting list for public housing in those housing. And the way they purchase the housing is through private investors. It can be with equity funds, so sort of crowdfunding that they do, campaigns. So not necessarily there is one investor buying one house. Maybe you give your share of a house, and in this way, they are encouraging to think that also housing investments can do good, so can be a social investment. With the foundation and with this idea in mind, we are trying to work in different directions. So we do want to work also with the public, understanding how you can use better maybe your resources or how you can connect with the private. We do want to promote the idea of private investors being able to generate housing solutions. And we do want to be sure that we speak about long-term housing for different categories of people. So, for example, we're working with the Danish Refugee Council, which is a member of the foundation. So they bring the whole focus on migration, and integration in society can also benefit from a housing first approach, right? So when you arrive to a place, a new place, part of the integration is again very often ends with a house. And what if we started it with a house? No? So what if you became part of the community? And then we have two organizations which are working with either with minors or with people that has dependency issues, mental health issues, and they take care of communities, so care communities. But then these people very often get out of those care communities, and they could potentially have their own apartment there, but they have a really hard time. So our work is also to understand how to give sequence to this care process and to make sure that those people don't end up homeless, because this could happen. So we are at the beginning because the Impact Housing Foundation is pretty new. Okay, so we are operating for just a little less than 1 year. We're already doing some nice projects and so on. So I'm very happy about how this is going, but it is new. So what I can tell you are the vision and the intentions. If we speak in a year or two, probably I can also tell you about some projects. Yeah.
Yeah, we should do a follow-up
sequence. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, Arezzo. It was really a pleasure.
Yeah, I just want to wrap up by asking you about role of citizens, maybe, and how could maybe people, either regardless of the profession that they're having, either they're a designer or not, could be involved in the issues in their city as it relates to housing, especially as it relates to affordability and the inclusivity of the housing. And if there's something that citizens can do, and if you know of any initiatives that people could join, yeah, just
sure. So what citizens can do regarding new forms, new ways of housing, as we have been following around some co-housing groups and so on, people can create their own housing solutions if they want. They need help. They need some team to follow, to train, but people can do that if they want. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort, but it's worthwhile. So if people want to change the way that they live, and this would impact also their neighbors or their neighborhood and so on, it is possible. Okay. And then they just usually they would, if they are in Milan, they would contact HousingLab. If they are elsewhere, they do. You see that people do that. Then for the housing, for affordability, citizens can definitely do something if they own a house and their house is on the market. We have with the Impact Housing Foundation an ongoing campaign. It's Proprietari Solidali. So it offers you the possibility to rent your house, so you still gain some money out of it, but at a lower price and with guarantees. So this is a way, but again, you need to own a house to do that. Some citizens do, so that's good. And then there are several, I mean, Milan is full with initiatives of participatory urban planning or participatory hearings. And I think that it is very, very important to be part of it, especially if you feel this in your neighborhood, you feel your neighborhood is changing, you want to make sure that it remains inclusive. So just to take part and to get informed as well, to get informed with what is happening. Next week will be the Forum Abitare, first time that the municipality of Milan does a 3-day event about housing. So this is a good way to get informed. In Turin, also in a few days, we have the Cities Forum. So I think that also it's not only for people that are in this profession, it's really also for citizens. I'm guessing that this would be the way. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a lot. I'm gonna ask you for some links maybe later to put it also.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes.
So thank you, Liat. I'm sure people learned a lot from the many projects that you work in, and it's always so nice to talk to you. Thank you for joining the podcast.
Thank you, Erez. It's really a pleasure, and you are doing a great job with bringing some awareness to these important topics. So thank you so much.
Thank you. See you soon, hopefully.
Bye.